This just might do nobody any good. Today's review is Good Night and Good Luck. This is a 2005 film. It was nominated for Best Picture of the Year. Didn't win. Lost to Crash, but whatever. This is directed by George Clooney, co-written by George Clooney, produced by George Clooney, catered by George Clooney, art direction by George Clooney, cinematography by George Clooney. Not really, but it was a passion project from George Clooney, for sure, in every sense of the word. Definitely this is something that, in many ways, I mean, it works as a tribute to Edward R. Murrow, who's portrayed wonderfully by David Strathairn in this film, but also of Clooney's father, who was a newsman, and he has a lot of respect for that. And this is a tribute to kind of the glory days of news, when, in that era, someone such as Edward R. Murrow, as noted in the film, could throw stones at giants. In this case, it heavily focuses on basically his war with Senator Joseph McCarthy during the insane communist witch hunt era, basically known as the McCarthy era. So a lot of it is with the news portion of that, and kind of where he starts off, wanting to be neutral, but how much neutral is neutral when the facts aren't available? That started to kind of raise suspicions to him, like, what's going on here? Becomes very much editorial with his program, his news program. See It Now is the name of his program, and his staff working to basically, in so many ways, call out Joseph McCarthy, and they know very well that this is going to result in a witch hunt on their part. We need to be clean. If anybody even read a book related to communists, had a friend who even said a single thing, we need to know now. We need to go into this completely clean. The fear is in the room. Is kind of the phrase there, which is absolutely, the heart of the movie. That there is a fear, and an unnecessary fear of this mad time. And I guess maybe it was more apparent at the time of the film's release. Maybe it's with time. I think the message is a little bit more subtle. But this was in so many ways, not too over the top ways, but somewhat drawing parallels to modern times. War on terror. You see something suspicious, you be a patriot, you report it. Anybody with a name more than 4 syllables, that's kind of suspicious to me. They might be a terrorist. Anybody could be a terrorist. It's a vague term. So let's hunt them down, basically. So it's an appeal to the senses in that respect. And it does kind of show the way news was back then, and a certain type of bravery that Murrow and his team went through and displayed through this movie. And it is very much a professional display of Murrow, a professional tribute, not so much a personal story. Like, they don't try too much to, say, humanize him, at least in certain other ways, like a biopicture would, like, show his domestic life, domestic issues, or drinking issues, smoking issues, anything like that. They don't try to do that. They do paint a professional portrait of him, because that's what this is about. This isn't about necessarily Murrow, but more about what he represents, and all the process, and the very, very careful process that he and his team had to follow in order to expose this madness, this bullyism from McCarthy, and how all the odds are against him. I mean, Murrow having to put in his own money to get it on the air, with Fred Friendly, played by George Clooney, as his co-producer, because maybe not unreasonably, advertisers wouldn't want to back that kind of content, and him having to make these compromises in order to not be compromised in his editorial, and in his search for the truth, basically, his search for what is good and right, and what is integral to news reporting, and to world events, and to justice in general. So they paint a very, godly portrait of Murrow, but rightly so. I think it works really well in the movie. But yeah, he does have to make compromises. The CBS executives making him do that kind of like, it's like a celebrity schmoozing show almost, person to person, where you can tell, he hates it. They have one, it's kind of like a funny scene in the movie where he's interviewing Liberace, and he's like, "Oh, Mr. Liberace," or whatever his name is. Do you feel someday you're gonna settle down, start a family? You see like the archival footage of Liberace. Like, "Oh yeah, I think when I find the perfect mate, I'll be able to settle down." I was just talking to Princess Margaret the other day, and she hopes to find a man in her life, and I hope for the same. Murrow's like, "Uh-huh." But anyway, speaking of witch hunts, but anyway, there's humor to the movie, so it's not an entirely serious and humorless kind of plot. You can absolutely tell, like, that this is co-written by George Clooney, because it has a lot of, the clever banter that you'd see, or that you kind of recognize in Clooney's persona. "Oh, we're putting a lot of money into this. Ed's gonna have to cancel Christmas. Oh, that's okay. He's Jewish. Oh, don't tell him, he loves Christmas." Things like that. Lots of, like, kind of sarcastic, witty back and forth and that kind of stuff. It brings a certain kind of a levity to it, so we don't feel like it's a morality lesson, at least not entirely. And while the portrayal of Murrow is very straightforward, very much his professional career, they do try to give it a little bit of humanity, particularly with the members of his news team, played by Robert Downey Jr. and Patricia Clarkson. They're the married couple, but of course CBS, big no-no, two employees can't be married, so they're keeping their marriage in secret. So everybody kind of knows about it, and they kind of joke about that, and they show them at home and stuff. And there's a good line in the movie: "Oh, don't forget to take off your wedding ring." What other wife would tell her husband to take off his wedding ring before going to work? Robert Downey Jr. is like Ava Gardner. It's good. It's a good movie, full of humor and things like that. But at the end of it all, I mean, it is an important message that the film conveys, and the parts that work absolutely the best are not so much the behind the scenes stuff, which is good. In some ways, the writing may be a little bit the agenda on its sleeve. The scene with Fred Friendly and the colonels in the room, maybe that's a little bit too much, but it works really well still. But the absolute best scenes are the recreations of Murrow's broadcasts, because David Strathairn in this film, pitch perfect casting, absolutely pitch perfect casting. His performance is just so expertly realized here that you feel you're witnessing the real deal, that he absolutely encapsulates the spirit of Edward R. Murrow and the spirit of the film itself. And that's something that's, the stars must have aligned with that, because if it weren't casted as well, or as good as it was, I mean, it wouldn't work as well as it does. I can't imagine anyone else but Strathairn playing this role. It's his best role, absolutely. He has this presence, and he has that kind of newsman authority to his voice that is just so perfect. It is absolutely entrancing when you watch his monologues. It is just spellbinding. Really, really well done. But again, it doesn't make him, doesn't show him too flawed. It's a tribute to him. In fact, the whole movie is kind of structured around this tribute to him after the whole McCarthy thing. And the supporting cast is absolutely great. I mean, we have Jeff Daniels, we have Frank Langella, Patricia Clarkson, Robert Downey Jr., George Clooney. And one role I really liked was Ray Wise, from Twin Peaks, Leyland Palmer from Twin Peaks, playing a colleague from the same network. I forget the newsman's name, but Hollenbeck, John Hollenbeck, or something Hollenbeck, where he's kind of outed by McCarthy's whole deal as a pinko, as a communist sympathizer, and that kind of ruins his career. And in involving health problems and personal problems. They kind of show all that stuff with him. Well, talk about that kind of stuff with him. His wife left him, things like that. It shows him as a casualty to this war. So I think he's a very important character to this movie, because it shows that there are consequences to this battle that Murrow has started with McCarthy. And the way it kind of all resolves, I mean, there's a poetry to it, I think. McCarthy, he does end up being censored, but not removed from the Senate. Meanwhile, Murrow, he's not fired, because like he's made a lot of enemies and network very angry at him. He's not fired, but his show is limited in run now, airs at a time when nobody watches it, limited in episodes. So I mean, what Fred Friendly says, well, what do you do in this situation? You know, when I outright cast them out, you put them in the back of the room, which is what happens to both McCarthy and Murrow in this film. So there's a kind of poetry to that. So the battle kind of came with its consequences, but you know, I think Murrow set out what he accomplished to do. So that's interesting. And I mean, another thing that you got to note about this movie, it does blend in archival footage. Like I mentioned, they had the Liberace thing earlier, but they do show footage of the real Joseph McCarthy. And the kind of like IMDb trivia, or like kind of the thing that everybody mentions, is that test audiences said whatever actor played Joseph McCarthy, way too over the top. Meanwhile, it was the real McCarthy, so that's food for thought there. But yeah, I think this is a great movie, and I do think its message is strong. Though 10 years later now, maybe not as apparent as it was at the time, because at the time when it first came out, people were like, "Oh, this is very obviously, you know, drawing modern day parallels." But now maybe not so much. Now maybe, if you want to, you can just appreciate it as this great story about this great newsman fighting this great battle against injustice. You know, in the same sense that Arthur Miller's The Crucible, without maybe the right context, you would just see it as a literal witch hunt, as opposed to communist witch hunt. So I don't know. All these years later, I think its message still stands as strong, though, because aside from anything involving the modern day parallels with War on Terror, it is a call to reason, really, and a call for being united in this world. This is 10 years ago now. Look what we can do now. You can reach in your pocket. You can pull out your phone. There is information at your fingertips. You can know anything going on in the world. We can be united through technology. Meanwhile, back then, 50s, the television was the primary source for that. So maybe things are a little bit better. Maybe the news response to that is being more alarmist, and maybe not quite as editorializing. It's hard to say. I kind of struggle with this. I reviewed Network last year, which I think Good Night and Good Luck and Network would be a pretty good double feature. But there is a call to reason, and as Murrow says, in the end of the film, this television, it can illuminate, it can teach, and yes, it can even inspire, but only to the extent that we allow it to do so. Otherwise, it is just wires and lights in a tube. So that's something to think about. And Clooney, maybe it's not so subtle, but I think it works. I think it's a great film. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't. Definitely worth revisiting. This feels like it's a recent movie, but here it is, made 10 years ago. Great cinematography, black and white. I'm not sure if it was filmed in color or filmed in black and white, but either way, I can't imagine this in color. It just wouldn't work as well. And by the way, this is like the Canadian DVD here. I think the American cover art is a little bit different, but they really play up George Clooney. Meanwhile, he doesn't look like this in the movie, so maybe they just want to say George Clooney is in this movie. But anyway, here's David Strathairn. David Strathairn, perfect in this movie. If that year it was it was Philip Seymour Hoffman's year, so he was winning literally like every award under the sun. If it weren't for Philip Seymour Hoffman, I think David Strathairn should have won the Oscar. He is just phenomenal in this movie as Edward R. Murrow, just incredible. So yeah, I guess those are my thoughts on Good Night and Good Luck. I love it. It's always great to revisit. Especially all this time later, it still holds up, still holds true, I think. So that'll do it. Comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video, if you like this review. Comment below. Let me know what you think of the movie. Do you like the movie too, or do you think George Clooney's soapbox should be kicked from beneath him? And if you haven't subscribed to me, please subscribe, because I have more 31 days of Oscar reviews coming. New video each day. So until then, good night and good luck.